Okay, good afternoon. I'm Michael Ignatieff. I'm the rector and president of Central European University. We're delighted to have you here. We're delighted in your interest. I want to introduce on my left Zsolt Enyedi, the Pro-Rector for Hungarian Affairs. On my right, Fodor, the Dean for Social Sciences. And on my far right, Liviu Matei, who is the Provost of this university. We're here to talk about the impact of the decision by the Hungarian Parliament to extend the CEU deadline for another year. This means, first of all, that CEU is now legally allowed to admit a new class for the 2018-2019 academic year. But the government hasn't indicated whether it will sign an agreement at the end of the next year, and it won't tell us what we have to do in order to comply. And so we remain in a state of legal limbo. This is unacceptable, but it's also unnecessary. There's an agreement with the state of New York that the government could sign if it actually wants to solve this matter. A draft text agreed by both sides has been in place since early September. We can't release this text. I'd love to show it to you, but if you want to get a copy, you should ask New York or you should ask the government of Hungary. But we understand that its contents guarantee the right of CEU to remain in Budapest, which is our home, in return for establishing educational activities in New York. Now, when CEU heard that this agreement had been negotiated between New York and Hungary, we immediately set to work to figure out how to comply. And we signed a memorandum of understanding with Bard College, which we've released to you today. It's this nice-looking document here. And as you can see from this document, there will be a CEU physical presence on the Bard campus. There will be student and faculty exchanges, and we will teach programs jointly. And I'm pleased to say that a certificate program jointly taught by Bard and CEU in the economics of inequality is now up on the New York State website, and we will be teaching that shortly. We're also releasing a letter, and that's this document here, from the Commissioner of the New York State Board of Education. This is an important body that accredits Bard and CEU. And they've said, and they've told the Prime Minister this, it's a letter to the Prime Minister of Hungary, that Bard and CEU have the authority to conclude this agreement. So the story, very simply, is that CEU has done everything that it can to comply with Lex CEU. We're complying with the requirement that there be a new bilateral agreement with a state of origin, and we're complying with the requirement that we conduct educational activity there. My question is, why can't the Prime Minister of Hungary take yes for an answer? Hungary has also signed and ratified a similar agreement with Maryland in relation to McDaniel College, and you will have seen that went through the Hungarian Parliament. So why sign an agreement with one United States state and not with another? That looks like discrimination to us. Yesterday, Minister Balog said it would be pointless to sign an agreement now with New York. And yet we hear from New York, it's the rumor at least, that Hungary has not walked away from the table in New York. So we're entitled to ask, what's going on here? Who's in charge? We have been defending our academic freedom for 26 years, and we're proud of the support that we've received from great universities around the world, and especially from our Hungarian colleagues and friends. What they understand, as we do, is that you can't have academic freedom. You can't have academic freedom unless you have the rule of law. Let me be direct and clear with you. Lex CEU has made a travesty of the rule of law. It was introduced without consultation in April. It was passed in 6 days. It's still subject to constitutional challenge. It's contested by the European Commission for violations of European law. It's been criticized by the Venice Commission for its arbitrary and discriminatory application. And now suddenly it's been amended so that a university having spent 6 months in uncertainty may be condemned to another 12 months in legal limbo. Finally, this is just unacceptable, and we call on the Hungarian government to sign the New York Agreement now. Send it to Parliament and restore the rule of law to Hungarian higher education. Thank you, and I'd be happy to take questions about the documents, questions that some of my colleagues may also be able to answer. Who would like to ask a question here? Don't be shy. Happy to... Yes.
Katrien Lauer from the Wiener Zeitung. Can you tell me if you have already faced consequences in terms of less students applying for places in the CEU of this whole situation?
I think there's no doubt that a university that's been placed in legal limbo eventually begins to face consequences. If you go outside, you'll see we have a full class. We've got more students we know how to handle with. But over time, we fear that there will be consequences to enrollment. We fear that there will be consequences for retention of faculty. That is, the longer this goes on, the more the university suffers. It's as if we're being slowly strangled. And I wish to make it clear that this is unacceptable. This is why we make this a battle for academic freedom. A university can't be free if someone's slowly strangling it by refusing to make the decisions that it could make. Let me reiterate, just so everybody's clear, we are here to find a solution. We are here to find a compromise. We believe a compromise is on the table in New York. All the government has to do is pick it up and sign it, and this whole thing will be over. We will be happy to go back to work. We will be happy to play our part in Hungarian higher education. We do not seek further confrontation on this issue. But to extend the deadline for a year in this matter inflicts exactly the kind of damage that you're describing. And we have a right, in fact, a duty, to speak out against that way of treating a university. Thank you for your question. Sir.
Nick Thorpe from the BBC. Have you had any communication since the agreement was made in the United States? So since you mentioned early September, has there been any communication between you and the government of Hungary since that time? Have they approached you? Have you approached them? Thank you.
This is one of the peculiar aspects of our situation. I can say that we have not had bilateral official contact with the Hungarian government since, I want to be precise here, late April. Late April. All of the bilateral contact has been with the Chief Counsel of the Governor of New York and the official designated negotiator, Mr. Altoj. We've accepted that. We've accepted that that is the best way forward. But I don't have any hesitation in saying here today that we would welcome bilateral contact of any kind with the government to seek a solution. Yeah.
Lily Bayer for Politico Europe. During one of the last press conferences we had here, if I remember correctly, you talked about a plan B and that the responsible thing would be to keep a plan B in your pocket in case things don't work out. Is this plan B now coming to the table?
Any responsible institution, as I said earlier, in that answer to that question. It has to have a plan B. And we've said from the very beginning, there is no way, there's no possible way that CEU will cease operations. Throughout this crisis, we've continued to operate as a university. We go to work and do medieval history and philosophy and all the things we do. We've maintained uninterrupted operations and will continue to do so. And we're hoping that we get a solution quickly to this problem that allows us not to have any further talk about Plan B and allow us to get granite under our feet. This is my point about the rule of law. A university, a free institution, cannot operate without legal stability. And that's all we're asking from the Hungarian government. It's a perfectly reasonable request. I don't want to discuss Plan B issues further because I don't want to go there. I literally want, our objective in this press conference today, the previous ones we've had, every discussion we've had for 6 months, is to stay in Budapest. It is our home. We love it here. Hungarian friends and colleagues, we love Budapest. We like staying here. We want to stay here. Just as simple as that. Sir.
Peter Murphy, AFP, Agence France Presse. One of the TV channels today reported anonymous senior government official who told them that the reason for the very sudden extension to the deadline was to avoid signing the agreement and possibly giving the perception of a concession to George Soros during the national consultation which is going on at the moment, and also during the election campaign in the next 5 or 6 months. Would you like to comment about that as a possible reason?
I wouldn't like to comment at all. Look, the motives of the government are for the government to explain, not for us. We are sometimes accused of politicizing this matter. All I'll say is that our objective is very simple, which is to remain in business in Budapest as a university. The university is not an NGO, it's not a political organization. We are not in the pay of George Soros. We're an independent organization. I'm responsible not to Mr. Soros, but to a board of 21 trustees. It includes the Chancellor of, Vice Chancellor of Oxford, the Chancellor of the University of California in Berkeley. You can't, this is a detail, folks, but it's very important. You cannot be accredited as a university in the United States unless you can give absolute guarantees of your independence as an institution. So they can say what they want about George Soros. It actually has nothing to do with us. Our view of this is that I can't affect the government's political campaign or its political agenda, but I can ask us to be left alone. Take us out of that. We have nothing to do with that. I have private opinions about this matter, but they're private opinions. As an institutional matter, this university is an independent, autonomous. It's a university, and it needs to be left alone. And whatever political agenda the government is running, it shouldn't drag this university in. That's why we're making this point about the rule of law. In a rule of law state, you don't tamper with institutions in this way. You leave them alone. I'm wondering whether my Hungarian colleagues and friends would like to add anything here. Zsolt.
In Hungarian?
Yeah.
Csak aláhúzni szeretném, hogy bár a mai sajtótájékoztató apropója az, hogy a parlament elfogadta a határidők eltolását, az igazi hír nem ez, hanem az, hogy az oktatásért is felelős miniszter bejelentette, hogy okafogyottá vált a New York-i egyezmény, és ez az, amit nem értünk. Erre szeretnénk magyarázatot kapni.
Eva? Anything that you feel needs to be emphasized and added, especially for the Hungarian audience?
Meg kell magyaráznunk, hogy miért gond miért lenne gond számunkra még egy évig itt egy megegyezés nélkül létezni. Egy nagyon fontos dolog az, hogy egyetem egy biztonságban létezzen, hogy a diákok tudják, hogy ha ide jönnek, akkor megkapják a diplomájukat, hogy a tanárok, akik itt tanítanak, tudják, hogy lesz még állásuk néhány év múlva. Úgyhogy, hogyha az ember egy kávézót nyit, akkor is szüksége van arra, hogy tudja, hogy nem jó az, hogyha a főbérlő odajön, és azt mondja neki, hogy hát maradhatsz itt, de majd amikor azt mondom, hogy nem, akkor nem. Tehát nem írok alá egy szerződést. Szerződés nélkül és egy jogi keret nélkül nem tudunk létezni ebben a kontextusban.
Liviu, I'm wondering whether you'd like to add something about how we see the BARD CEU MOU actually operating in practice.
Well, yes, actually this is a more general point, and you made it already, Michael. We do comply with the requirement in CEU law, Lex CEU, about educational activities in the United States. As you know, the law has several requirements, the most important of which are the bilateral agreement, the intergovernmental bilateral agreement, and that agreement exists and needs to be signed. CEU can't do anything about it because we are not a government. We cannot negotiate, let alone sign, but that text has been negotiated. And the other condition is to have educational activities in the country of origin, which in our case is the United States. And I should say that the deadlines outlined in the law originally were very difficult to meet and punitive, and several organizations, universities, including ourselves, have contested these deadlines. Now, however, that we do comply, it is very interesting that the government decided to extend the deadlines. And I should say that, you know, the government forced us to comply with these deadlines, but at the same time, they helped. I should say, in fairness, that during the summer, as part of the negotiations with New York, we have been informed about the requirements of the Hungarian authorities regarding educational activities in the United States. So we are able to know what do they mean by educational activities. And more specifically, as the rector mentioned, we have been asked directly by the Hungarian government to have a memorandum of understanding with the New York chartered and accredited universities, and we concluded that agreement very quickly. You will get a copy today. That agreement has been approved by the Board of Trustees of the two institutions, CEU and BARD. The text of the agreement has been sent officially to the Hungarian government by the Chief Legal Counsel of the Governor of New York. As the rector also mentioned, the highest educational authority in the state of New York has confirmed in a formal letter that this agreement, memorandum of understanding with BARD, is valid and the activities that are outlined there are authentic. So on the formal side, we fully comply with this requirement. Now, you may ask, what exact educational activities? What does it mean de facto that we fulfill this requirement? So we have and we will continue to develop a physical presence in the United States. So we have our own premises by now on the BARD campus. We have and we will continue activities including teaching, research, and training in the United States. And as the rector mentioned, we already have an accredited program in the United States, a registered program, but that's the equivalent of accreditation in Europe. And if you go to the website of the New York State Education Department, you can find that program listed under our name and under the name of the Bar College, because that is a joint program with our New York address. So we do fulfill the conditions that have been communicated to us through the New York State regarding educational activities in the United States. So we don't understand why all of a sudden, the moment we actually fulfill this condition, the government decided to extend the deadline and not to sign the agreement.
Question. I want to make sure everybody gets around a second one from you then.
Yes, did you ask an official answer from Mr. Balog to explain what he meant by pointless when saying this agreement is pointless? That's one question. And the other, could you detail a little bit the financial damage that had already caused this whole situation to the CEU, and how much, what are the expenditures for this activity in the Bard College? How much does it cost?
Well, the expenditure is manageable. the financial losses we're suffering as we go on can't be calculated at the moment because we don't quite know how bad the hit or the impact on our recruitment will be long term. But there's simply no question that a university that's deliberately kept by the government in a state of legal uncertainty to suit their political convenience is a university that is in danger. I don't want to overstate that. Do I look? I'm calm, but we just have to acknowledge this. And no university in Europe, let me make this very clear, no university in Europe has been put through what we've been put through. It's just unacceptable. I'm here having this press conference because we want a solution. But a solution is on the table. And every time we get within reach of a solution, the goalposts get moved. The criteria get changed. In answer to Minister Balog, I always want to treat a minister with the greatest respect, but it's very hard to understand what's going on. The minister gets up yesterday and says it's pointless to sign this agreement. When we know from the discussions that have been going on in New York, we're not at the table, we're only briefed indirectly, that discussions in apparent good faith have been going on for months. So why negotiate in New York if you then get up on a Monday and say it's pointless to conclude an agreement? This kind of double messaging has been going on not just recently, but for months. And CEU is entitled to ask, what is going on? And we can speculate about what's going on. I don't want to. It's not my business. I'm not a political commentator. We all know the atmosphere in this country. But the fundamental issue is an issue about the rule of law. You can't run institutions, free institutions, and we're a proud free institution without a rule of law basis for your operations. That's what we're seeking from the Hungarian government. They claim to be a member of the European community. Fine. There are standards relating to the rule of law in Europe. There are meetings later this week. This is an important point. There are meetings later this week of the European Council in Brussels, where the heads of government will meet. Mr. Orban will be in the room with other heads of government. They are entitled to ask whether rule of law is respected in Hungary, if this is the way a university is being treated. We don't ask, let me make it clear, we don't ask for special privileges. We don't ask for exemption. We're saying the reverse. We're saying we have complied. What's your problem? Let me repeat it again. Why can't you take yes for an answer? That's our situation. And the accusations that we want special privileges or that we don't respect Hungarian law, it's precisely the reverse. Our argument is that it's the Hungarian government that is not respecting the rule of law. We don't seek controversy here. We're simply trying to explain to the world and to the Hungarian community and to the European press our very unique situation. There is no university in Europe that has ever been put through this experience. And we think it's completely unacceptable and unnecessary because we can find a solution. There's a solution right there at the end of Minister Balog's fingertips, at the end of the Prime Minister's fingertips. He can pick it up, sign it, we're done. And we will comply in every respect because we want to stay here, because we respect Hungarian law, because we respect the whole structure of this country. This is an elected government. We get that. Any further questions? Sir.
Barabás Balázs, Digital Television Romania. Did you try contacting the American embassy here in Budapest, and maybe they can find out the details and the backgrounds of all this story, given that the Hungarian government is supposed to need to give a specific answer to such a request from the American embassy? On a separate note, the chargé d'affaires today in a round table discussion, just said that he is very worried about the liberty of press in Hungary. Thank you.
Well, we've been extremely grateful for the support we've received from the Embassy of the United States from the beginning. I think you'll remember the very first press conference we held in April, who was there in the front row but the Chargé d'Affaires of the Embassy of the United States. But with all due respect to the United States government, we feel that we need to make our own arguments. The particular issue that's been at stake is whether a United States federal agreement, not an agreement with a state, but with the federal government, is required in order to comply with Lex CEU, and that has involved the United States government because it's a federal matter. And the United States Embassy has been very helpful in pointing out to the government of Hungary that the federal government of the United States has no jurisdiction in higher education, and that you have to deal with the state of New York, and that's why we're dealing with the state of New York. So I won't comment on what Chargé Kostelancic had to say. I wasn't present, but I would thank the State Department for all its help throughout. But as I say, we feel this is a deal that can be done between the state of New York and the government of Hungary, and we don't need additional help. We can get this thing done, but let's do it. Any other questions, comments, any additional points to make? Yes, sir.
Vécsei Kovács László, Pesti srácok. Some months ago, you did say that it's impossible to fulfill the requirements of the new law, but now we see the CEU complies with Lex CEU. So was it impossible or not?
It was impossible within, well, at the time when I made that remark, there were two problems. First, the deadline. Secondly, the fact we didn't know what compliance meant. What you have to understand about this whole process is the government did not define to us what compliance with Lex CEU actually entailed. Then we had negotiations in New York through the summer, right? We were not there, but in that process, the compliance requirements were clearly defined by the 1st of September. As soon as they were clearly defined, we complied. Okay? You can't jump through a hoop until you know its shape and size. Do you see what I'm saying? When I said it was impossible to comply, it's impossible because we didn't know how high the hoop was or how big it was. By September, we knew how high the hoop was, what its size was, and what we had to do to jump through it. And we jumped through it. And we're delighted to jump through it. I want to reemphasize, we're looking for a solution here. Okay? Further questions, comments, any additional remarks? Anything you'd like to say in addition?
Maybe just to add to this, at that time...
But perhaps in Hungarian as well.
Tehát amikor azt mondtuk, hogy lehetetlen ezeket a feltételeket teljesíteni, akkor az egyik feltétel az volt ugye, hogy szövetségi szintű megállapodásra van szükség. Mi tudtuk, hogy ez nem szövetségi szintű kompetencia. Ezért joggal gondoltuk azt, hogy ez a feltétel lehetetlenné teszi itt maradásunkat. Ehhez képest most azt látjuk, hogy a McDaniel College esetében nem okoz gondot az, hogy ilyen a két fél által aláírt megállapodás nem létezik, mert az amerikai oktatási miniszter levelét a magyar kormány elfogadta, mint előzetes megállapodás. Ezt mi akkor nem tudhattuk. Tehát ez egy változás a kormány hozzáállásában, és lehetővé tette azt, hogy most már egyre több feltételt így teljesíteni tudjunk. Tehát megváltozott a helyzet ahhoz képest, ami akkor volt.
Perhaps for the benefit of the English language reporters, you could just give us a edited summary.
Yeah, just the question was, why did we say at that time that the conditions are impossible to meet? And I pointed out that among other things, one issue that has changed is the insistence of the Hungarian government on a federal level agreement. The Hungarian government has accepted the letter of the Education Department. The letter in which the minister says that this is a state-level competence, not a federal-level competence. The Hungarian government accepted that letter as a preliminary agreement. This was a change, and that made possible for the McDaniel College to pass that hurdle, and we assume that it makes possible for us as well to pass the hurdle. Otherwise, it would be a clear case of discrimination.
Let me emphasize the discrimination point. You know, we're not complaining, but we're just saying it doesn't make sense to sign a deal with Maryland and ratify it and not to sign a deal with New York. I wish I could show you the text of these agreements. They're very closely modeled on each other. And the text of the agreement I'm talking about is not 40 pages long. It's 2 very simple pages. And the Maryland agreement and the New York agreement are close. They're different because we're different institutions, but they're very close. So it makes no sense to us that you can do an agreement with Maryland and can't do an agreement with New York. You can do an agreement with McDaniels, you can't do an agreement with CEU. We think that's discriminatory. Doesn't make any sense. And the government has not explained why that's the case. Further questions? Sir.
Just finally, what does the CEU see as a next step? I mean, it seems now that there is possible stalemate and some indications from the government side that this could be spun out for several months, even possibly to 2019.
Well, that's why we're really holding this press conference today, because we're concerned about stalemate. We're concerned about this dragging on. We're concerned about this becoming a political issue in an election year, frankly. It shouldn't be a political issue in an election year. This is a university. There's absolutely no reason for the government to drag it in, and it seems to me to be doing them some harm. It does them harm in the United States. I mean, imagine, you're the governor of New York, and you've been negotiating for 3 months in good faith with the government of Hungary, and suddenly you've got a minister of state saying it's pointless to sign an agreement. What do you think the governor of New York is thinking right now? Okay? What do you think leaders of the other European governments are thinking as they watch a government that doesn't seem to have a clear understanding about what the rule of law implies and requires? In other words, we can't understand why they don't just sign this deal, take this off the table, because it's doing damage to their relations to Europe, and it's doing their damage to their relations with the United States. We want to be constructive. We want to be helpful. We don't want to be an obstacle to good relations with the United States. We don't want to be an obstacle to good relations with the rest of the European community. And the solution is simply to sign this deal and get this matter resolved. Well, thank you. If there are no further questions, thank you very much for coming. We'll be happy to stick around and talk to you privately, and thank you for your interest in this issue.